Hey, everybody. Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online to talk about Florida's big 29-16 win over number 11 Tennessee at the Swamp on Saturday night. And we have nobody better to talk to about this game than Lee McGriff, Gator great, former Gator coach, former Gator commentator on radio, knows the program front and back and forth, inside and out, and really has some amazing insight. So we wanted to bring Lee back because, Lee, we talked to you after the Utah game, and I'll tell you, it wasn't pretty. And this was almost just the exact opposite of that game. It was kind of that game in reverse, quite frankly. What were your general takeaways? What did Florida do against Tennessee that it didn't do against Utah?
Well, I go back to one of my theories that may or may not be true, but the Utah trip, we talked about how disruptive that trip might have been. Hurricane week, leave on Tuesday, go to Dallas, practice in Dallas, stay overnight, out of sync, go to Utah the next day, that might have contributed. So they get back home, they go have a dominant win, mostly running the football, but played good defense, ran the football against McNeese State, got in their rhythm, their practice regimen was in sync. And I think you got to first tip your hat to our defense playing so well against a pretty potent Tennessee. And that may be questionable because it's early in the season, but there were times when Tennessee executed, wow, came out of my mouth. They threw some balls, they ran some routes, they made some plays. But the Gators shut them out in the second quarter, shut them out, 0. And then held them to 3 in the third and 6 in the fourth. That's pretty good. And, only allowed Tennessee 16 points. That was one thing. The other is we ran the ball really well. ETN had a great game, but he had people blocking for him, that's for sure. But the running game was great. And I don't think it hurts when you play at the Swamp and the crowd was like it was. I was amongst them. That's a different part of my life now. I've shared before on one of our discussions that the last time I'd been in the stadium just as a fan was when I was a senior in high school. So I'm enjoying that, but my goodness, that stadium was electric from the beginning, and that couldn't have hurt the Gators either.
Lee, not many people have your perspective. Again, you played at Florida, great receiver in the 1970s. You coached at Florida in the 70s and 80s, and then you were up in the booth. You're in the broadcast booth, but now in the stands. So that's really four things. Well, full circle, like you said, starting in the stands, then player, then coach, then broadcast booth, now back to the stands. Can you recall? I mean, look, there's been so many great electric games there historically, and probably games from the 60s and 70s that people like me don't even know about that were just as loud. But can you, the electricity in the air that game, anything comparable to it in recent memory to you?
Not in recent memory. Not in recent memory. I mean, certainly the place can come alive, and there have been games, back when McElwain was here and we pulled out the long ball from Felipe Franks to beat Tennessee. That was one. The LSU game, that we ended up throwing the shoe and losing the game. That was pretty electric, but it was a beautiful night. Everybody stayed. I don't know that I sat down for 5 minutes, not by choice, because all the fans were standing up. And, I certainly, when Travis was playing during the Spurrier era, I was in the stands, and those were some incredibly electric crowds in games. And, for me, my all-time game was the 1997 Florida FSU game in the Swamp, and nothing quite reaches the intensity and excitement of that game. But this was in that world. It was. I didn't see patches of open seats. I didn't ever, for 4 quarters. There might have been a slight lull in that crowd in the third quarter, but not for long, because Tennessee started making people think, this might turn into a game. So it was electric. It certainly was way up there, and that energy had to benefit our Gators.
All right, we're joined by Lee McGriff, Gator great, as I said, player, coach, broadcaster at Florida. And if you like what we're doing, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. I'll make sure I go back and answer all of them. Yeah, Lee, it was incredibly electric there. And I heard somebody say that they needed the crowd. The crowd was going to help them. Somebody at Florida said that. It might have been Billy Napier. And I started thinking, well, if the crowd's part of the team, does that mean you're now eligible for NIL money? Can you get a piece of the action there?
Yeah,
but I mean,
anybody wants to contribute.
But it was a real. Lee, it was a real impact. I don't think there's any question about that. Recruits I talked to after the game said you could see the Tennessee offensive line sort of getting a little bit out of their rhythm.
No question. And, back in the day, that day's long gone when everybody huddled up, crowd noise was a factor. And the quarterback may have had one or two checkoffs. But the way they play, everybody plays today, and Tennessee plays today, there is no huddle. They line up on the line of scrimmage. They're trying to communicate, and that crowd, on purpose, was disruptive to their communication.
Lee, coming out of that game, I mean, so many interesting stats. The funny thing is that Tennessee actually ended up with more yards than Florida, even though Florida essentially dominated the game. And it reminded me of the 96 Florida-Tennessee game, not in talent, but in the sense that Florida jumped out to that 35-0 lead up in Knoxville. Tennessee kept scoring and scoring. And by the end of the game, it was 35-29. And then you looked at the stat sheet, and Peyton Manning had almost 500 yards passing, and Tennessee had twice as many yards as Florida. But really, Florida had dominated that game to get in the position where Tennessee had to get all those yards. So it was similar to that. So I thought that the Florida offense was efficient, but Lee, they also got that big chunk play from Trevor Etienne that they desperately needed. And it was just from a casual fan's perspective, I thought the Florida defense was fantastic in the first half. Second half, I don't have many complaints. I mean, you're an old coach. You get that big lead. You're just trying to make sure you're not giving teams freebies, right? You're just trying to get to the end and win the game. What did you think of the offensive performance?
Well, I thought it was solid. The time of possession was, and I'm hearing myself talk. These were the axioms, that the old school philosophies that Billy Napier is implementing. Don't turn it over, control the clock, play field position, and when you get a chance, capture a moment, make a big play. And so, we threw the ball, and by the way, Mertz, his arm, he throws a beautiful ball, and he's accurate. He's completing about 75% of his passes, but we don't constantly challenge them vertically. That's not our way so far. And again, the running game was great, but part of the reason that, in my opinion, that the statistics were more favorable to offensively to Tennessee, that gets into field position. We had some good field position, which means you take care of the ball. You don't score, but you kick it, you back them up. They gotta go the long way. Well, that eats up clock. That works in our favor, but eventually, as the field position shifts, we don't have as far to go to get to the end zone, and so that was true, and that was what Florida used. And then in the second half, again, in the name of old school, you get to the third quarter, and I was around some fans that were getting itchy to throw the ball and being a little critical, and I said, we're ahead 19 points. We got one quarter to go. The odds of Tennessee even having 3 possessions, which is what they needed, 3 possessions and 3 scores to win, is really slim. Not likely that they'll even get the ball 3 times. But if they did get it 3 times, they got to score 3 times. So, Coach Napier just kind of grinded on the clock, ran the ball, and kicked it. It worked.
I mean, the last thing you'd want to do, and I had people complaining to me too, why aren't they putting their foot on their throat? And I'm like, we just saw this 2 weeks ago in Salt Lake City. We just saw Utah do the same thing. Get the big lead. The last thing you want to do is give a free touchdown to the other team. You've got them dead in the water. Don't give them any life, right? I mean, isn't that
true, Keith? And we are the Gators, and so Steve Spurrier's our guy. He changed that whole mentality, really, almost in football, where he'd have taken that situation and he would have gone after it, scored a touchdown, and that would have been the end of the story, even if Tennessee would have started scoring. They'd have been down, not by 19, but by 26. That would have been his solution. But this way works, and it's how football was played forever.
But don't you also, and I'm going to give Billy Napier the benefit of the doubt here, he knows his personnel too, right? I mean, he knows what they can and can't do probably, and maybe that's just not in their DNA. I don't know.
And I didn't see it. Some of the people sitting around me said that Mertz had cut his hand. I don't think it was his right hand, but maybe that was a factor. And then Wilson was out of the game, so we didn't have our full arsenal of receivers. So all those factors, the coaches know better than we. They live with these guys, and so they weren't feeling like maybe even if they were inclined to do it, maybe with where we were at that point in the game, personnel-wise, we didn't need to do that. I don't know. Either way, it worked.
Yeah, exactly. A win's a win. I look, when my team wins, I never go back and second guess a single thing. Okay, because every little thing that you think would have made it a bigger route could have actually done the opposite. Every little thing changes every single thing after that, right? So anyway, Lee, I got to ask you, what kind of from this game were you pleasantly surprised with from Florida? For me, it was the run blocking. I mean, pass blocking was still a little suspect, but what about for you?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm putting the defense and the running game right next to each other.
Okay.
That high octane offense of Tennessee. They have good players. One of the things I think we are greatly improved defensively is we make tackles. We tackle people. I don't mean we never miss, but by and large, whether people are in space or at the line of scrimmage, we make tackles. We stop them. And I know how we ran the ball against McNeese State, totally dominant. And I know some people were frustrated in a game like that we were just running the ball. But, what did we score? 7 touchdowns. And is that the right number?
Yeah.
But I didn't know whether we could do that against a team like Tennessee. We did. We ran the ball really well. And our running backs are good. But as you just said, we were blocking people. There were helmets on helmets, and our backs are good at finding the open space.
Lee, I talked to a couple other former Gators. I hate former Gators isn't the right word. Gator greats like yourself last week. Larry Kennedy being one. He had that great interception return against Tennessee in 1991. Then Kevin Carter, an old friend of mine from back when I was in school. And they both kind of told me the same thing. We talked on the air, we talked off the air, and then everybody's kind of thinking, where are the difference makers on this team? What's the identity of this team? Well, we're starting to get a little bit of a feel for the identity. And also we're starting to see that maybe there are some difference makers on this roster. Trevor Etienne, some guys on the defense, some guys in the secondary. Graham Mertz is a difference maker right now for this team. And in fact, Lee, you go into this season, and when Graham Mertz's transfer happened, let's talk about him for a minute, and then we'll get into some other difference makers. Florida was poo-pooed by everybody across the country. What are they doing bringing in Graham Mertz? He's never really lived up to his potential at Wisconsin. And lo and behold, he's not only been not a liability for Florida, he's been an incredible asset and maybe just what the doctor ordered for a team that's very young and on offense. So what is Graham Mertz doing well that you like right now?
Well, I think his brain is really good. And what we can't see or hear from afar is I don't know how many play calls or checkoffs he's doing to get us into those running plays. The initial call may be one thing. He looks at the defensive front and said, let's go run it over here. I would guess that he's making excellent decisions, not just on his part throwing the ball, but in the running game and guiding that running game. He's not doing the running, but he may be the one guiding it and making the calls. And I see him as poised. I see him as aware of situations, and he can throw the ball. I mean, he was the number one recruit, drop back passing recruit, as I recall, coming out of high school. And I've heard this from multiple sources, credible sources to me. He can throw the ball. Well, there's evidence of that to me. Whether our receiving core in general is equal to what he might be able to do passing, he's still effective throwing the ball. It does. When he drops back or they're moving him around some, rolling him out, I'm not scared at all with the ball in his hands and him making a throw. He can make all the throws. So I think, I'm avoiding the phrase because it sounds so bland. He is an excellent game manager so far. And, that doesn't excite people. But really, if you're coaching and want to have a great team, if your guys can do what the plan is, execute the plan, and manage the game, every one of them, you got a chance to win. And he's doing that. I consider that a big compliment that he's very aware of what Billy Napier wants him to do, and he manages it. I don't see panic in him, not one time.
Lee, let's go to Trevor Etienne, the running back, 172-yard game against Tennessee. Historically, from the 90s to now, if you run the ball in that game, whoever runs the ball better generally is going to win. Florida ran it better, significantly better. Now, obviously, this final stats were a little skewed in the running game because once Tennessee fell behind, they had to throw the ball and throw the ball and throw the ball. But, Lee, Trevor Etienne looks, and this is no slight against Montreal Johnson, Florida's other running back, but Trevor Etienne, I mean, am I wrong in saying this? He looks like a dude. When people say there's just a guy or he's a dude, he looks like he's a dude. What would you say?
I think Montreal Johnson's an excellent back, but Etienne has a burst, has some speed that Johnson doesn't have, and that includes the inside running game. When he sees a crease, he accelerates it through it. Johnson's a tough kid, and I think Etienne is too. But his speed gets him through those holes, and then if he gets a step on somebody, he can outrun them, and he's exceptional. He is. And, so many, you're right, in the Tennessee game in particular, historically running backs or the running game, if who ends up with the best running game performance wins the game. But a lot of times, particularly through the 90s, that was we jumped on them, we had the score, and the running game, we had, Tennessee shook up, and the running game was just to grind out the clock because we had a big lead.
Yeah.
Etienne's performance was at the heart of the game. He was at the heart of the game plan when the game was on the line, and running it and all throughout the game. It wasn't a second half deal. He did it from beginning to end.
Lee, I was never a coach. Okay, I played high school golf, and quite frankly, not very well. and so I want to get into the mind of a coach here. And again, we're joined by Gator great Lee McGriff, former player, former coach, former commentator with the Gators. Lee, those little shovel pass type things or whatever they were to Eugene Wilson, the speedy freshman, earlier in the game where he got him outside. Does that then allow you to run up the middle a little better? Does that help? That was the first part of my question. And were a lot of those plays, those running plays that Etienne was getting the bulk of his yards on, I'm just trying to go back in time. Were those some of those counter runs that we used to see Steve Spurrier's team use?
I think so. I mean, I'm a little bit at a disadvantage because I just see it when it happens instead of seeing replays and watching tape. And if you notice, there's constant motion from the wide receivers. Pearsall probably runs about 5 or 6 miles a game, just going in motion. And they do run those jet sweeps from time to time. And, Pearsall does a good job with it, and Wilson does too. So when they're constantly flashing that back and forth, then it makes the inside people, particularly linebackers, have a moment of hesitancy. They have to see that receiver go past the quarterback. And if the linebacker, obviously, if the ball's handed off going wide, that he's got to move laterally in a hurry. And so if he just pauses less than a second and the ball's handed off, you've got a less aggressive linebacker to a degree. So that seems to be very much a part of this offense because it's constant, the motion, and then running some jet sweeps. And they showed early in the game they were going to really run those, but then Wilson was out, so they didn't seem to do it as much throughout the game. But early on, it was very much a part of the the offense and how it looked like. Well, that's their plan to get outside.
Yeah,
is with the jet sweep, and then they're going to run between the tackles with the backs.
Lee, the one question we keep getting, and again, we just got a few more questions. I know Lee's got actually a life to get back to here, and we appreciate him joining us. I've got 3 guys out there buffing and waxing my Maserati, and you come and do this show for free. So I want to thank you for that. So I do have to ask you though, just suppose this is, 1981 and you're on the staff, you're wearing the coach's shorts and you're heading over to the office, but you're the special teams coach. And in the first 3 games, you've had 2 guys wearing the same number on a play, big penalty. You've had guys miss kicks. You've had shank punts. I just wonder, what's it like to be in charge of Florida special teams this morning? Because even though Florida won, impressive game, as a coach, you still, not everything is nirvana. Not everything is perfect. And Florida's still struggling on special teams, Lee. So what do you think is going through the mind of the people in charge of Florida special teams right now? And can they correct these things? Can they fix some of these things?
Well, I thought there was improvement. I don't know that you put it on the coach's back when the trajectory of your field goal kicker's kick is about knee high. So that was a negative for special teams. But help me, Keith. Other than those 2 mishaps, which were very concerning at the time, obviously we changed kickers and they got better. Yeah. But give me a couple of other ones that concern you.
Well, I think there were obviously a guy kicking is how do you control that? But you're still in charge of that group. I mean, if a guy works for me and he doesn't do his job, it still comes back to me, right? So I just feel like, the accumulation, but there were accumulation throughout the season. Yeah. There were a couple of shanked punts, I want to say. They're not getting much out of the return game, but not many people are these days. But just overall, I think
they are getting out of Pearsall is the ball doesn't hit the ground, and that's a big deal. You end up with some positive yards that he does catch the ball. But I hear you. So if I'm the special teams coach, you don't get much sleep when you're coaching anyway. But he's probably getting none. And I don't think these problems are for lack of effort. But again, I'm not close enough to know what may be cooking. I know we have athletes that we can put on special teams. So, hopefully soon we get more and more consistent and error-free on special teams. Your punter's got to hit the ball. Again, that's an issue if he doesn't. But I don't know at the moment of truth. He probably launches them in practice.
Yeah, exactly. What do you do? There's some things within your control. There's some things that aren't in your control. Lee, that one field goal that you mentioned didn't get very high off the ground. I was just a baby, but I've seen the replay. That had David Posey, 1975 Georgia, at the end of the game, which you were gone with the program, so I don't even know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I had just left. And David was a great kicker, by the way. And but yeah, it can happen. And, it's when you're a coach, you think you know what you got. And on game day, when something, actual execution, it's just a player being a player and he makes a mistake. I don't know if we have time, but I'll give you an example. We, back when I was coaching, and I will spare the receiver that I'm going to talk about. I'll spare his name because I love him. He's been very successful.
You can tell me off the air. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, he was a really good receiver. He's gone on to be an orthopedic surgeon, and I love him. And at this point in his career, Coach Pell and I kind of got nose to nose about who was going to be the starting receiver against Mississippi State out in Starkville. And I felt strongly about it. Conversation got a little ugly, stood my ground, and this guy starts the game. And early on, Mike Shanahan's the offensive coordinator, and I'm telling Mike, let's go deep with him. So not with Coach Bell, but with this receiver. It's all there. This receiver runs a beautiful route. The ball's on the money from Wayne Peace, and he drops it. Well, it just was a moment as a coach, I'd have bet my life on it. And it didn't happen. at that time. He overcame it and did very well. But I'm just saying, the special teams coach or any other position, it's not like he's probably seen what's happened. Now, again, 2 number 3s, that's one thing. But when you're talking about a kicker executing or a shank punt, I don't know how you outcoach that unless you've seen 10 shank punts during the week and you still don't change your punter. That's one thing. But just sometimes life happens on game day.
Lee, just a couple more questions. And again, we appreciate you stopping by to chat with us after this huge Florida win. And it was a huge win. Let's not make any mince words there. But, we play this game on our message board after every game. After the game, you've processed everything. What's the ceiling for this team? What's the floor for this team? And it changes. It changes every week. After the Utah game, it was mostly people thought, okay, 4 wins, 5 wins. But this win sort of changes the way we think about this team. There's still very tough games coming up and games that are 50-50 games. South Carolina on the road, where if they were playing them at home, you'd feel really good. Missouri on the road in November, Lee. Boy, I've seen a lot of Gator teams, some of them that you played on, a struggle in those cold weather atmospheres and the Kentuckys of the world. Okay. But it seems like the ceiling and the floor are both rising. It seems like this now definitively looks like a team that should have a winning record. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I think there's great hope, but just what you described, you immediately question, okay, that running game was really good. But what you don't know when you're in the early part of the season, Tennessee, are they not very good? Or are they really good and we just had an incredible victory? Well, it's an incredible victory, but time only tells how good Tennessee is. So then you question a defensive-minded Kentucky team. Their head coach is a defensive guy. Are we going to run the ball like that against Kentucky? You just start questioning, which is the excitement of watching the games, because it's not scripted out. You don't know. But clearly, our running game offensively was where our greatest success was to win this game. But you do start saying, well, can we do this against whoever, starting with Kentucky? So I don't know, but what I did see, I think a lot of Gator fans, I wasn't one of them, but after the Utah game just thought, oh my goodness, we are a disaster. Well, after this, there's hope. At the very least, there's hope that this can be a very good year.
And there's always hope when you have a good defense, right? There's always hope because you're going to be in games.
So true.
Yeah. Hey, Lee, take me back to 1973, let's say, and you just win a big game. 1974, better season. You win that big Auburn game at Florida Field. I want to know what it was like for you as a young player after a game like that. Were you showing up at parties in a toga? Were they carrying you in on shoulders of other people? Were you the guy that go versus? What was Lee McGriff doing in 1974 after a big win in Gainesville, Florida? I got to know. Come on. If there's an R-rated version, you call me when we're off the air, okay?
No, I would say that my girlfriend and I, who is my wife, we certainly went out after the game with our friends and our teammates, and we had fun. I tended to I don't know if modesty or humbleness or whatever, but not put myself in too many big deal situations. But we went out, had a great time. Locker room was happy, and it's such a defining, euphoric feeling to win a game like that. Your memory continues to amaze me, but that game against Auburn was around mid-season, and back in the day, there were only about 1 or 2 football games on TV. We were one of them, and as I recall, we were both certainly in the top 10, but I think maybe the top 5. And for me, selfishly, Auburn had not allowed a touchdown pass at that point in the season, whether that was game 5 or 6. So I caught a touchdown pass against Auburn, the first one against them that year. And but that was a great win. Defense played fantastic. And at that time, I can't remember the points, 26, 27, 25 points. But that back in the day, that was that was a lively offense if you got up into the high 20s. So, but it's such an extraordinary experience to play for the University of Florida, play in that stadium, packed crowd, win a big game, and be home and go out and be amongst the students and all of that. You know, I had a teammate from Bristol, Florida, who I love to death. And he would say every once in a while in a situation like that, he would say, hey, he'd get everybody's attention, say, I'm going to tell you one thing. This is dang utopia. That's what he would say. This is dang utopia. And a lot of years have gone by, and I'm not so sure he wasn't wise beyond his year, because at that time, that was about what utopia would be for me.
It's an incredible power, Lee, that someone like me will never feel that you did, to be able to have the ability to make 50,000, 100,000, 200,000 people happy at the same time. Unbelievable feeling. Hey, Lee, after the game, before we go, I got to mention one thing. While you were out celebrating in the streets doing God knows what the other night, I don't know how many beers you shotgunned. I don't know what Lee McGriff does after games. But while you were celebrating the win, Florida did get a commitment Saturday night from Waltez Clark, a 4-star running back from Tampa Plant. Plant. Yeah. The first commitment. Yeah, your old high school. How about that?
I've heard about him, not seen him with my own eyes. But, you know, a Plant Panther should come to the University of Florida.
Well, and he's an exciting young player, Lee, and he's a high-character guy, and I think he's going to represent the University of Florida well.
Great.
That's it. For Lee McGriff, Gator great, all-time Gator great. I'm Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online. We appreciate everybody stopping by. Hopefully we can get Lee back maybe after the Kentucky game. Hopefully that'll be another big win. You never know. Who knows what the future holds, Lee, but we appreciate you coming by as always. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Keith.